Welcome to the ISO on the Gonzaga Nation Media Network. I'm your host, Dan Dickau, bringing 3 times a week conversations with athletes, coaches, fellow analysts throughout the world of sports. Today's just want to talk about the NBA pre-draft entry list, the early entrant list, and how it's kind of gotten out of hand, gotten out of control. Yesterday, Sunday the 24th, was the last day for college players to put their name in the draft as an early entrant. If you have exhausted all of your college eligibility, it doesn't matter. You're automatically entered into the draft. You see it with Gonzaga, though. For example, if with the COVID year you did have an extra year of eligibility, like Andrew Nembhard, you would have to declare for the NBA draft. So when you look at how many players truly declare for the NBA draft, it is completely out of control. I don't have the final numbers for this year. I'm sure the NBA will be releasing it probably actually today, April 25th, or in the next day or so, because there's a deadline for the paperwork to get in. And it has to be time-stamped in the league office for that early entrant to be fully accepted. So the time has gone and went, and I'm sure the NBA will be releasing their official early entrant list soon. But if you look just at last year had 353 early entrants for the NBA draft. And when you look at that, some of them were college players that went back to school. Some of them were college players that had no business even going to any pre-draft workouts. I'm sure there were some. I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure there were some that were not even invited to the Chicago pre-draft combine or even had any pre-draft workouts. And so you feel for those guys because they got such bad advice. You have the Europeans that kind of go through a different early evaluation process than most college players, simply because most international players are playing professionally in Europe under a different style contract. They're being evaluated playing amongst men as opposed to the college players who are playing against guys like size age. There is the occasional European player who's playing at a lower level in Europe, where really you're just at the mercy of evaluators' true eye in regards to what do they project at. A perfect example in recent years would be Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, he was playing, I believe it was second level in Greece, and you had to really believe what you were seeing and believe out what you were projecting to be able to go out on a limb and really convince your front office that this was the guy to pick in the mid-teens. I believe he was the 13th or 14th pick. Lo and behold, he's become an MVP, an NBA champion at this pace. You would imagine he'll probably be a Hall of Famer as well. So that European process of evaluating guys, as mentioned, is much different. But when you go back to it, 353 guys a season ago declared. So many of those guys you'll never hear from ever again. And so what I wanted to do was lay out some of the most notable early entrants that are coming into this year's NBA draft. Ochai Agbaji from Kansas. He could come back due to the COVID year, but does not look as if he will. I believe he's signing with an agent, Paolo Banchero. Kendall Brown, a talented freshman from Baylor. Kennedy Chandler, a talented freshman from Tennessee. Another freshman that's ultra-talented, Max Christie from Michigan State. Jalen Duren, who Gonzaga fans will know well after matching up with Chet Holmgren in the second round of the NCAA tournament's a freshman. I would not expect him to be back. Tari Eason, a freshman from LSU. He's actually a Washington product out of Federal Way. Spent his first year at Cincinnati, then transferred to LSU. But with all that turmoil and with him having a couple really nice stretches, he's decided to test the waters. I would imagine he's a late first-round pick with the chance to move up even higher. You keep going down the list. A.J. Griffin from Duke, a freshman. Chet Holmgren, a freshman, obviously from Gonzaga. Jaden Ivey, a sophomore. Trevor Keels is an interesting one in the fact that he declared. But I don't imagine him being a first round pick based off of what I had seen throughout the year. But Duke guys will get as good of eval as anybody because they've played in big games. They've played in front of NBA evaluators throughout. So I'm sure he's got some influence telling him that he's definitely solid up on the list to go ahead and declare. A sophomore out of Arizona that I really like, Ben Matherin, has declared for the draft. We had already talked about Nembhard with Gonzaga, and you got some other really interesting names such as Scottie Pippen Jr., who is a junior from Vanderbilt. Yes, that is Scottie Pippen, the former Bull and former Blazer and Rocket. That is his son. Shaedon Sharpe, freshman from Kentucky, never even played a game. He reclassified early to get to college, never played a game, but he is in the NBA early entrant pool. Drew Timme as a junior from Gonzaga. That's something I'll touch on in a second. With his ability to come back, Peyton Watson, freshman from UCLA, a guy that has tremendous long-term potential but isn't quite ready. You look at the NBA draft so many times on potential. I think he only averaged about 4 points a game, but you see the size, the length, the athleticism, and you hear about the work ethic that makes you think he's going to be a good player. Does somebody bite the bullet and take him a year or two before he's truly ready? It's hard to say. But when you look at some of these other names on the list, and as I mentioned, Drew Timme, another one is Nigel Pack, Kansas State guard who's an early entrant, but he's also committed in the transfer portal to go to Miami with an $800,000 2-year deal in NIL. You're looking at a couple other names, Makel and Makai Mitchell, transfers, sophomore bigs from Rhode Island Twins that are in the NBA draft, but they're also in the portal and have committed to Arkansas. There's so much volatility and up in the air with this, with these NBA early entrants, as well as putting their name in the transfer portal, that it's really hard to truly figure out who's coming and who's going. I know I touched on it a week or two in regards to when we really went in depth on Drew Timme's decision with, has he signed an agent? What are the timelines? How can he come back? Would he come back? What would it look like? But really, there's, because of how the guidelines and the timelines are structured with the NBA and the NCAA, it's a wild west right now to figure out how some of these guys, where some of these guys truly are going to be. Because, say Nigel Pack goes to the NBA Combine and presents himself really well, and he gets even if it's a second round guarantee from a team, knowing if as a second round guy, would I make as much money as a second round pick or as I would with this new NIL deal I signed with Miami? It's really hard to say, and I think it's going to be it's going to throw a lot of questions into the wind for a lot of players, and it already has done the same for an unbelievable amount of college coaches. So with the entry deadline just passing, the next date to really look at is the Combine, May 16th through the 22nd, where organizations get a close-up look at everybody. The 17th is the NBA Draft Lottery, so that's where I think you're really going to see, a little bit more clarity for maybe those top 5 picks, because there's a number of guys that have top 5 potential, but does that 2, 3, or 4 pick fit best with a certain player? And so that's where there could be a lot of different movement. I think that's really, to me, I think there's 3 clear-cut guys as the top 3, and that would be Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren of Gonzaga. I think you can't go wrong with Holmgren. I don't think you can go wrong with Banchero, and I don't think you can go wrong with Jabari Smith. A lot of it now comes down to which team has the first, second, and third pick and how their rosters are currently broke out. Do they have someone at a similar position? Does the style that their head coach wants to play with fit what the guy that they really want to take? And then would they make a trade either to move the pick or to move a player to open up the rotational minutes for the young prospects. So those are so many things to keep in mind. But I think that really the next biggest one would be June 1st is when the early entry underclassmen, and this is where you're talking about if a guy like a Bancaro or a Holmgren decided to come back to school, you would know at that point if they were coming back. Now, those two guys are probably not good examples because they're not coming back, but maybe a better example would be sophomore Johnny Davis from Wisconsin. He's an early entry candidate. He would have to pull his name out by that June 1st deadline. And then that really will help solidify a lot of things, I think, in the transfer portal if another program has a roster spot or two left that they haven't used. A guy comes back, he's in the portal. That could make it really interesting because it's so late in the game and there's going to be a lot of roster spots that are already full, and it's not going to allow some teams to go get guys. The other two that I mentioned were the two brothers from Rhode Island, Mikkel and Makai Mitchell. They're sophomores. If they come back, they would have to, pull out by June 1st, and that would give a huge bonus to Arkansas and Eric Musselman, who's doing an unbelievable job on the recruiting front as well as in the transfer portal. I mean, he seems like he's got more talent than anybody outside of maybe Duke in adding to his roster next season. The last one would be June 13th, the final deadline for all draft picks. And this is, a senior who isn't planning on using that COVID year has declared. He could now come back if he has that COVID year. And then the international players have until June 13th to withdraw their name as well. The interesting thing about the international guys is with the international guys, sometimes their season goes up until that June 13th, June 15th type date. Their season for the young guys is so much longer and different than these college guys that we're really focused on and we know so much about here in the States. I remember when I played in Europe for a short bit, I was hurt, and so I left the season early, but we would have started the playoffs around April 20th, and had we made it all the way to the finals in Germany, we would have played all the way up through, I think it would have been June 25th. So those European prospects many times are playing all the way up until the NBA draft, and then they'll come right over after being drafted and many times play summer league with the team that drafts them right away, as opposed to where, the college season here, obviously if you're on a okay team, you end mid-March. If you're on a great team, you end that first weekend of April. You've got a little bit of downtime before you can really focus on your skills and work on yourself, getting ready for the pre-draft workouts and the combine and whatnot. So it's much different for European guys than it is for the NBA, for the college guys. But really, the whole thought was just to talk about the 353 early entrants a season ago. There's only 60 draft picks. So you're looking at 290 some guys, if the same number this year holds true as what it was last year. 290 guys are essentially making poor choices in not getting drafted. Now, some of them will end up picking up a free agent deal, or maybe they really don't like school and all they want to do is to get into a G League contract or have the ability to go overseas, and they think an early entrant announcement is the way to get some workouts, get an agent that can start vying for them and representing them in a way to put them in a better position to play overseas earlier. But I personally think the system's broken. I think there's got to be ways to figure it out. I think with the NIL, it's changed a number of things. The NIL has actually kept, I think, so far, a lot of guys from making poor decisions in going to the NBA draft. Hunter Dickinson, Oscar Tshiebwe. You're seeing guys come back to college because they've got the ability to make money that if they went to the draft and didn't get drafted, or they were a free agent trying to make it through the G League, they wouldn't be making near the amount of money next year that way as they would with NIL money in the upcoming season. So It'll be interesting to track. It'll be interesting to follow again. 353 early entrants, only 60 draft picks. And the thing that most people don't realize is there's a lot more Europeans that are being considered every single year for those 60 draft picks than anybody would know. So for the ISO on the Gonzaga Nation Media Network, I'm your host, Dan Dickau. Epic Sports Bar at Northern Quest is Spokane's home for sports. Catch all the action up close and personal on a 30-foot HD TV. Enjoy upscale pub fare, craft beer, and cocktails too. Epic Sports Bar, where watching sports is a sport. More at northernquest.com. Big thanks today to our sponsor, Northern Quest and Epic Sports Bar. Want to spotlight our epic fan of the game, and that is Rob Curley of Spokane today. He is our epic fan of the game. If you have a question for us at Gonzaga Nation SI, the Gonzaga Nation Media Network, send us a question on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and if we select your question or we select you as the fan of the game, you will win a $25 gift card to Epic Sports Bar at Northern Quest Casino.